Morning. In the name of the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, Amen. Please be seated. So, if you take a look at your program, there's a painting on the cover. There's going to be a quiz. Whoever can A, identify the artist, and then B, look the location of the painting, will get a special present from me. That's not in my purview. I'm sorry? Is it Rubens? No, you're not even close. I'm going to give you a hint, it's Italian. But I don't want to get sidetracked. So I'm going to just, bear with me. You may already know this, but if you don't, the Gospel of John is distinct. It was recorded last between 85 and 90 AD. Matthew, Mark, and Luke narrate Jesus' life and are easily categorized. Matthew is Jewish, Mark is the oldest, and Luke is polished. None of this applies here. John's vantage point is unique, and he introduces concepts and language that are absent in the Synoptic Gospels. This is Christian mysticism. The overarching message of John is Jesus as divinity incarnate. The miracle at Bethesda recounts Jesus' third healing, but in a highly visible setting. At this point, Jesus is more or less unknown except to his followers. Now he's on display in Jerusalem. The city is alive with festival goers, it's crowded, and it's the Sabbath. Jesus asks, "Do you want to be made well?" So he's talking to a man that we are told has been infirm for 38 years, which is an exaggeration. Nevertheless, his condition is permanent. It's somewhat ironic that he asked this question. Of course, the man wants to be healed, and of course, Jesus knows this. Interestingly, the man doesn't request healing, nor does he respond directly to Jesus' question. He wants to enter the pool, and by stating that, really also states he doesn't know who Jesus is. Literally stuck. As much as what's said. And typical of Jesus, he speaks on multiple levels, addressing the invalid and, at the same time, the ruling elite, the Pharisees, albeit in a more nuanced way. We know this because the passage ends stating it was the Sabbath. So let's pause just for a second. We've got a passage 7 sentences long. In it, a scene is set, a storyline is established, and there's tension in the plot. An analogy may help shed some light on what's happening. Imagine all of us, it may be a little hard to imagine, we're Washington, D.C. insiders, and a very important dignitary arrives, someone who's been highly anticipated and someone with a passionate following. In today's terms, Jesus is trending. So the stakes for the hosts are high. A reasonable expectation would be wooing this individual with lavish parties and gatherings in Georgetown or Embassy Row. But no, our dignitary doesn't mingle with the elite and spends no time at all where he's expected. Instead, and I don't know how many of you know Washington, D.C., he visits the inner city, the Northeast, the Southeast, and the Southwest, where poverty and despair are entrenched. He chooses the marginalized at the expense of alienating his influential, powerful hosts. From the world's perspective, this makes absolutely no sense. Of all the places in Jerusalem, Jesus appears at a crowded, smelly, unsavory public bath literally near the sheep's gate. You can imagine that sheep are coming in through the sheep's gate. That's where they came to be sacrificed. I'll let you fill in the blanks. Granted, Jesus' behavior is somewhat stilted, but being a visitor to the capital, his question to the man about healing becomes plausible if we understand this is a request for permission. Jesus isn't on his home turf. Protocols and customs require respect. At the very least, Jesus' question provides a clue about what's ahead. So I believe that the miracle is actually incidental. It's a means to an end. Jesus knows exactly what he's doing and knows that he's being scrutinized. He's on display. So what happens? He deftly turns the tables. Healing the paralytic proves Jesus' divinity. More importantly, it is a pointed critique. Jesus immediately grasps what is amiss. By righting an obvious wrong, he upends the prevailing social order. Let's make no mistake here. This is a public shaming. The elite have failed to fulfill God's fundamental command of caring for one another. What kind of leaders would allow such suffering for so long without doing anything? The elite are caught completely unawares. From the moment Jesus arrives, they are on their back feet. When we see ourselves in the place of the scribes and the Pharisees, Jesus' behavior cannot be what they expected. It's a blatant and a deliberate affront. And now we arrive at the central part of the message. Jesus isn't speaking about religion or adherence to ritual observance, nor is he teaching about miracles. Despite ceaseless striving, scrupulous, highly visible, righteous behavior, a preoccupation with appearances and judgment, what the elite's doing isn't pleasing to God. What is important is the disposition of our heart, as evidenced by Jesus' compassion. Jesus sees the inequity and acts immediately. Are we growing in mercy, compassion, and openness to begin seeing what may be different or outside our comfort zone? Are we becoming more empathetic, more forgiving? Touch, healing, encountering the individual go hand in hand with Jesus' larger social, religious critique. You cannot have one without the other. Examine the description of those gathered: the ill, the lame, blind, and paralyzed. By virtue of their collective condition, these are the most marginalized members of society. Why? Because they cannot take care of themselves. They are dependent, often completely, on others. In verse 8, Jesus concludes his teaching by stating, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." If there was any doubt in the mind of his onlookers about his identity, Jesus now puts this to rest. This is the final straw. Leadership has been outwitted, then shamed for failing in their responsibilities. Jesus then has the temerity to contradict the commonly held mores governing the Sabbath. The voracious wolves in attendance are now literally seething. Sabbath was the one day devoted to God. Honoring the Sabbath is part of the Decalogue, and honor was paid by resting, literally doing no work. As foreign as this may sound to us, in antiquity, Sabbath rest was sacrosanct. The seventh day is consecrated and blessed. Jews are commanded to do no work. We find this in Exodus chapter 20. The miracle and Jesus' command make this passage very charged. Religious observance isn't bad, but it doesn't equate to righteousness. Jesus clearly understood the importance those in power placed upon appearances, and he saw right through this. Miracles and healing are the domain of the divine. Likewise, the law, as previously understood, is meaningless if it leads only to ritual behavior but fails to touch our heart. The lesson from Bethesda can be summed up by a statement Jesus makes in Matthew chapter 9. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Amen.